We are back once again with Dr. Jason Maljaars, a neurologist at St. Francis, and he joins us every other week to talk a little bit about nutrition and diet, and we've been learning lots of stuff. You don't see it, but every time we get done filming this, we end up talking to him for a while about things that we're eating or trying to cut back on. So he's helping us a lot, so thanks for joining us again today about that.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely.
So one question that I have, and I feel like many other people would have, is what exactly is cholesterol?
So cholesterol is a kind of waxy fat-like substance, and it is completely, critical for cellular life. So all of our cells are lined with a double membrane of cholesterol, and it's also involved in producing hormones as well. So it has a bad name, sort of in the general public, you could say, but what it really is, in and of itself, is a completely critical molecule that we need to survive.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'd always hear it, I feel like, in a negative way. So what is good versus bad cholesterol then?
We hear about bad cholesterol and good cholesterol. So it's a misnomer, as you can imagine. It's like saying there's good water and bad water. It's like water is the same. It's what's in the water that makes it good or bad. So with cholesterol, the molecule doesn't change. It's the same, but it's carried by different molecules called lipoproteins. And depending on what is carrying the cholesterol and how much of that you have, that can sort of associate with either being protective against heart disease or sort of negatively impacting your risk for heart disease. So first, all we could measure was total cholesterol level in our blood. And then in the 1970s, we learned how to measure, we realized that cholesterol was carried by different things, and those different lipoproteins do different things. HDL, high density lipoprotein, is what we call the good cholesterol. And it's thought that in higher amounts, and this is fairly well established, in higher amounts that seems to be protective against heart disease. That's why we call it good cholesterol. And then LDL is low density lipoprotein that can associate in some instances, in some ways, with an increased risk of heart disease, but definitely not as straightforward as we have kind of, acted as if it is. A simple fact there is there was a study of, I think it was well over 100,000 people showing up to hospital rooms with heart attacks and looking at their LDL, their bad cholesterol level, and 50% of them had normal LDL levels, and they're still there with a heart attack. So it's not as straightforward. It's a very complicated thing.
Okay,
very complicated. Yeah.
It is very interesting. And so I know with the holidays coming up, we're going to be eating a lot of food.
Yeah, we
are. I know. But how does our food affect our cholesterol?
So the good and bad cholesterol levels and et cetera, again, we're oversimplifying it like crazy, but that's fine. They are affected by what we eat, mainly. So if you have a high carb diet, so carbohydrates, flour, rice, pasta, cookies, cakes, all that kind of stuff, which has been what we've been recommending at least to some extent since 1980. Remember the food pyramid? The bottom of the food pyramid was carbs. That was the basis of our diet. So a high carb diet, we know, increases our LDL, our bad cholesterol level. So that's not a good thing. It lowers our HDL, which is our good cholesterol, and it also increases another thing that you get checked when your doctor is checking your cholesterol, called triglycerides, which is a type of fat in your bloodstream. It raises that, and that's also a bad thing. So a high carb diet is bad for your cholesterol profile at that point is more tending towards forming plaque buildup. That's ultimately what we're getting at, is that plaque buildup is really the downstream problem of all this. So high carbs is a problem, which the holidays and every other honestly day is filled with that. Sugar is another one. So sugar, through various mechanisms, both kind of by causing, so there's another aspect to this, just to show you how complex this is. If your cholesterol is being carried by, let's say, LDL, the bad cholesterol, that in and of itself is not the whole picture. If that cholesterol undergoes a chemical process called oxidation, it is more likely to then get lodged in the arteries and start a plaque buildup. And oxidation of cholesterol happens when you have high sugar content in your diet, and also when you have high seed oils in your diet as well. So seed oils that are made out of soybean, canola oil, vegetable oil, corn oil, and a few others. Those are very inflammatory, and they also lead towards a bad cholesterol profile and a higher risk for plaque buildup. So high carbs, high sugar, seed and vegetable oils are the problem.
Okay, interesting. And I know you said like it's not as straightforward as we often hear. So
Yep.
a lot of times you hear lower your cholesterol. People have high cholesterol levels. Should we be trying to lower our cholesterol?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I mean it's a great question because it depends what you mean by like who how do we determine what's normal cholesterol,
Yeah.
and then is your normal cholesterol the same as mine, right? And probably not.
Yeah.
So and there's like no way to test that. So we have to work with what we have, which is we do studies on people and we try to get some rough idea of an average sort of cholesterol range that you should be in. But there's a couple caveats to that. So there's a genetic condition that's fairly rare, but we still see it here and there where people have a problem with lowering their cholesterol, metabolizing their cholesterol, so they get very, very high cholesterol levels, and they do have a high increased risk of heart disease. So we know like super high levels are a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of the coin that never gets talked about is that super low levels are a problem. So a couple things. In the studies of people that have been studied for like decades with their cholesterol levels and their disease and all that, people as they age, people with very low cholesterol levels do more poorly on cognitive testing. So when you test their brain function and their memory and all that, they do worse if they have very low cholesterol levels.
Okay.
So it's not benign. It's not like high is terrible and the lower the better.
Yeah.
That's one thing. There was an interesting little finding out of, I think, 6 of these big studies that were done in the late 1900s, noticing that people who had very low cholesterol levels were twice as likely to die either from suicide or from some kind of violent death.
Wow.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And the thought behind that is, so our brains are 70% fat. They use a ton of cholesterol all day to function properly. So they actually need cholesterol to be available to them. So you can't just drop your cholesterol as low as possible. Your brain is going to suffer from that. So there's kind of an optimal range, but definitely not lower is better. That's not true.
That's so interesting.
That is very
how
interesting.
I feel like I've always just heard have low cholesterol.
Lower the better, yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
so interesting. Now, earlier you talked about seed oils, and sometimes you talk about things that we shouldn't be eating, but can you give us quickly some things that maybe we should be eating for people who are trying to kind of change their diet and things?
Absolutely. So in general, nobody exactly knows, I think, the right answer to that question. What exactly should we eat and should we not? And again, it's complex and it's kind of individualized as well. But in general, we should start with eating foods that occur in nature, as opposed to being produced in a factory, and they should be produced the way that nature intended, right? So eat your meat from a free-range cow rather than one in a feedlot given antibiotics and hormones, that sort of thing. But in general, animal product food is not something to be afraid of. So everything, red meat, chicken, fish, eggs, dairy products, all that kind of stuff is not something to be afraid of, like egg yolks. The cholesterol in egg yolks, by the way, does not increase your cholesterol when you eat it. It just doesn't do that in any sort of significant way. So, so animal product food, plenty of vegetables, clean, organic, not covered in pesticides and all that sort of thing. Fruits you have to be careful. They're genetically designed these days to have very high sugar content, so you want to eat, fruits that are less. You don't want to eat as many fruits. Berries are a very good option. Nuts are good. And then when it comes to using fat for what you're cooking with, either animal product fat, so butter or lard or tallow, or oils that come from plants that don't require any processing, so olive oil, avocado oil, and coconut oil. If you take a bunch of olives and you squish them, oil comes out, that's great. If you take a bunch of soybeans, you have to put them through a factory with 17 steps before you get something that looks like oil at the end, and that's not normal. We should not be eating that. So that's a very sort of, I guess, little outline of what we could be eating.
I'm running through my mental checklist
I
of
know.
things.
He said berries were good. I just started eating some strawberries.
Yeah, so lots
Strawberries
of
are bad, actually. They're covered in pesticides. I'm sorry.
Oh man, that's
Strawberries are the strawberry is good. I'm very
What
sorry.
about
The strawberry is
raspberries?
good. Raspberries, yeah, they're good. They themselves are good, but the problem is they are so heavily treated often that just get the organic ones.
Okay,
Yeah.
got
So you
it.
can still
Wow.
have your strawberries.
Well, we're very good things to apply, especially around the holiday season and everything for sure. Thank you so much for coming in. We always
you.
learn so much. So
You're
hopefully you
welcome.
guys are also able to use this and apply it to your life too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. All right, guys, stick around. We'll be right back after the break.